Man, it's hard being an American today. I'll tell you. Most of the country's gonna work, work, work and never seem to get ahead. Buying a home is practically out of reach unless you want to live in the Midwest or in the ghetto. College is giving our youth debt that they'll never pay off. And even the day-to-day stuff's getting more expensive. In case you didn't hear, the dollar store is now the dollar fiddy store. Why is it so expensive for the average American today, and what does that mean for our future? What will it mean for our upcoming elections? Where is it too expensive to live these days, and where can you, the middle-class family, live and still feel like you're living in a first world country? That's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to talk about what's expensive, why it's so expensive, and what it means for our future. Spoiler alert, it's not looking very good. It's just not. Broke. We're broke.
My name is Leo, and I keep my money in 3 jars. 1 jar's for spending, 1 is for saving, 1 is for sharing.
I think a lot of people in the United States right now only have 1 jar, the spending jar. I once heard that only half of the U.S. population has enough money saved to last them 3 months if they stopped working. That's pretty scary. A lot of people feel the system's broken today. Look at the number of homeless on the streets right now. More than 500,000 people are houseless these days, and that number's going up. That's about the same number as China per capita, but far higher than most of Europe. If you haven't already bought a house, you're screwed. No, that's posturing, but it's sort of true. In the last year alone, the average price of an American home has gone up 18%, people, in 1 year. That's the highest in almost 50 years, back when houses were modestly priced. In 1953, a family could get a house for $19,000. That's $180,000 in today's dollars, but that's still reasonable. Even going back to 2008, houses were in the $200,000 range. Today, the average home price is $350,000, and there's no signs it's going down. There's just less homes for sale, and building can't keep up with demand. Plus, the cost to build new homes has gone up a lot because the cost of building those homes. You know, wood, copper, drywall, windows, doorknobs, they're all hard to get now. And the labor market's tough. You know, getting enough home builders to a site to actually make these homes. It said there's 300 to 400,000 open positions for construction workers. It's just hard getting people to take the trade seriously these days. People just don't want to do this labor like they used to. And if you pay construction workers higher wages, then the home prices are going to go up even more. A lot of recent college grads say they'll never be able to afford a down payment. Home prices alone are one reason why so many people are fleeing states like California and New York, among other terribly run liberal states. Get this, last year, 1 in 20 people bought a house without even looking at it. Because if you don't jump on a house, it'll be gone. Likely over asking price, sometimes all cash, and occasionally from a foreign investment company like China. Rent's getting out of hand too. Look at this chart. In San Francisco, you need to make $118,000 a year to afford a single bedroom apartment, just to step in poop on your stoop. In many other cities, it's close to $100K a year. Even going down the chart, somebody needs to make close to $50K a year just to get a 1-bedroom apartment. Why? It's a money thing. Developers aren't building low-income units. They want to build high-end luxury units or big giant homes so they can make more money on the land they bought. But it's not just the lower class that's struggling to find a place to live. It's so expensive in Oakland that the city government's had to step in to pay for housing costs for its teachers. Or in some cases, they're even knocking down old district buildings and putting in cheap little townhomes so their teachers have a place to stay. What is going on? Isn't that terrible that our teachers need help paying rent or some will be homeless? And if you've ever been to Oakland, you'd know they need as many teachers as they can get. There's actually a lot of teachers that are houseless today. And what about our seniors who can't afford rent with their Social Security payments and suddenly find themselves working as greeters at Walmart to help pay the bills? That's just sickening. What country are we in, people? Did you know that today more than half of young adults live with their parents? It's true. Back in 1980, you could pay $1,800 a year for college at a public school. Today, it's $10,000 a year. And look at the private schools. It's $34,000 a year for an elite education. College tuition and fees have gone up 1,200% in the last 40 years. What in the heck? Today, these kids go into major debt to get a college degree, and then they come out and they complain that jobs don't pay very much. That might be true, although I'd say these kids just need to learn to work their way up to the top. I feel a lot of these kids have little work ethic and they want to be paid well before they prove their value. I also feel many are spoiled little brats who want everything handed to them and want everything equal so they can stare at their phones all day. Personally, I think they should just skip college and figure out another plan. But again, they can't think for themselves. But I do feel bad for the ones that take on all the debt. It's crippling, and when you factor in interest, they can barely chip away at their loan duty. It all started back when colleges started to focus on test scores as a prestigious metric for admission requirements. So in the late 80s, colleges began raising tuition and using all that extra money to pay for the scholarships for the kids with the best test scores. Today, colleges get more of their money from tuition than they do from the government. The taxpayers just aren't funding colleges much anymore. The students are on the hook. Plus, all these colleges need to have fancy new buildings and athletic facilities, right? But the problem is, 2/3 of all jobs today require some college, and only half of college grads come out feeling like the debt was worth it. In 25 other countries, including much of Europe, college is just about free, but those grads are going to pay higher taxes during their working lives, so there's that. And then they get a job and start a family, and they have staggering childcare costs. In Massachusetts, families pay an average $30,000 a year for childcare. In California, childcare is 18% of a family's budget. In DC, professional childcare costs more than poor families make in a whole year. Why is childcare so expensive? Well, by law, you can only have so many kids per class. Insurance costs a lot, and a good childcare center needs to be in a nice area, right? These facilities have to charge a lot to cover their rent.
Here's a 1982 Dodge van, $64.95. Drive it 10 days and try it out. Here's a 1983 Ranger pickup, a Ford Ranger, $59.95. Drive it 10 days. Here's a 1980 Ford Mustang, $22.95.
Back then, you could get a car for hardly nothing. But today, the average cost of a brand new non-luxury vehicle is about $45,000 in America. That's a lot. It's gone up 12% in the last year alone. The computer chips used to make these fancy new cars are hard to come by. And since there's a shortage of labor around the world and a shortage of parts, there just aren't as many cars. So car makers don't have to lower costs to make a deal on the showroom floor. The cost of a used car is up 10% since last year too. If you can even get a car. I went by a used car lot the other day and they had a big empty parking lot. I told the guy the car I wanted and he was like, "I don't think you're ever going to get that." Ever. Did you know that there's a lot of people in this country, people who have a college degree and a lot of potential, who intentionally stay poor so they can get subsidized health care? It's true, and that is just pathetic. Look at this chart. Here in the US, it costs nearly double for health care than any other country. The same procedure in the US is way more expensive than in other countries. Whether it's a hip replacement or drugs, it's always higher here. In our country, private insurance companies negotiate prices on your behalf. In the US, we're treated like consumers, and hospitals can charge whatever they want, just like Best Buy can charge whatever it wants for a flat screen. I don't know about you, but I don't have the expertise to negotiate the price for an MRI or a C-section. And a lot of times, people don't have the time or the ability to negotiate a medical procedure. You just get it done. But in other countries, there's no negotiating prices. Hospitals have a set price for each procedure. The government holds hospitals accountable for their prices. America's healthcare system's an unregulated market dominated by companies with good lawyers and lots of lobbying money. There's pros and cons to the alternatives, but as it stands today, the U.S. healthcare system is a messed up system. And good luck if you don't have insurance. There's nobody negotiating on your behalf. If you don't have insurance, you pay at least 4 times as much for medical care. No wonder 2 out of 3 bankruptcies in the U.S. are because of medical expenses. After all, someone's selling these attractive I Love Red Cloud t-shirts online for $54.99. Holy guacamole! Inflation, people. At the end of 2021, the U.S. saw the biggest rate of inflation that it had in nearly 40 years. This chart has a list of just some of the things that are more expensive today. It's everything: energy, food, building materials, medical care, cars, dog food, travel, everyday goods, bacon, chicken wings, Happy Meals, that Chinese-made crap you got on Amazon, taking somebody out on a date. There's a lot of reasons why things are so expensive now. Part of it's because of COVID. Less available workers means a shortage of supplies, so the price goes up. There's fewer people digging up the materials, there's fewer people in the manufacturing centers, and fewer people to get the goods to your house. All that inflation hurts everybody, but it really impacts poor folks. The working poor and those collecting government checks, they don't have a cushion to fall back on. So when gas prices or the cost of food goes up, they have to make a choice. Cut back on food or turn the heater down. And you can't not eat. Look at this chart. The poorest Americans spend 157% of their income on living expenses every month today. That means they're going further into debt. Now people complain that we shouldn't send our jobs overseas and we should make these things in America. But would you want to spend $20 on a little knickknack that would cost $1 if it was made in China? If you think household goods are more expensive now, how expensive would they be if they were made in the USA? It's too late to turn it around now. China. So to meet the rising cost of living, they've raised the minimum wage. But it hasn't kept up with the cost of living completely. At least that's what the little crybaby kids are saying. They call today's wages starvation wages. So instead of finding a solution, all these young people have decided they just won't work anymore. All these COVID payments have made people realize how great it was to stay at home and stare at Netflix all day. Instead of taking that crummy job and working their way up, they don't take that crummy job at all. The service and fast food industries are suffering. The former McDonald's CEO says there's a looming catastrophe. I mean, we're paying you $14.50 an hour for a mindless job. How much more do you need?
The average minimum wage will increase in 25 states and in 56 U.S. cities by 2025.
Who's that?
I'd like you to meet Cousin Mappy. He'll be staying with us for a while.
Wow, Cousin Mappy's smarter than you. Maybe I should be paying him $50 an episode instead of you, Mappy.
$50? Sweet! Technically, I've already found a bunch of data issues where I could tell you where you were wrong.
I don't know how I feel about this one, Mappy. Now, what does all of this mean for you? Well, you can move to a cheaper state. Here's a look at the states where it costs a lot to live and where it costs not a lot to live. You can pay a lot to live in, say, Austin, Texas, but you're going to be paycheck to paycheck. Or you can live in a cheap city that doesn't have a lot of things to do and has high crime. Lots of people choose the Austin route and then they get pissed off that they can't get ahead. You could say that's their fault, but at the same time, you got to live where the jobs are, right? That is, unless working from home sticks around permanently. But move to a cheap state and you get what you get. Worse schools, higher crime, less fun, less jobs. So all of this is happening right now, and single people in America have it worse. And there's a lot of single people in this country these days, I'll tell you that. There's more people living with their parents or living alone in this country now than ever. Back in 1960, 13% of Americans lived alone, and there were about 4 million single-parent households. Today, 28% of Americans live alone, and the number of single parents has tripled, and the number of people living with their parents is way up too, because they're all crybabies. I mean, the U.S. has already seen a population drop. As things get more expensive, U.S. couples will hold off on having kids. How can we be a world leader with a declining population and a bunch of crybaby 20-year-olds living at home? And the cost of living is just going through the roof. If things go the way they are, we're going to see even more homeless people. The lower class is going to continue to get bled dry by landlords and educators and hospitals and child care centers. Maybe that's what we're seeing right now, a revolt among the lower and middle class. They either won't work their way up from low pay positions, or they'll just burn stuff down every chance they get until their safety net widens. It's not a bright future, I'll tell you that. Has capitalism failed us? Europe seems to be happy-ish with their socialism. Here's the cost of living index for the whole world, and it looks like it's as expensive there as it is here. They pay much higher taxes over there, but a lot of shit's free. However, their youth are even wimpier than our youth, which is shocking, people. Imagine that. Even wimpier 20-year-olds over there in Europe than we have here. You've heard it all before. Profits before people. Rich companies are in bed with sleazy politicians. But can we force developers to build cheaper housing? Can we make healthcare companies lower costs? Can we ask colleges to lower enrollment? That's not very American. Conservatives love to complain about inflation and handouts, but they're not offering any solutions either, people. This whole trade war just raised prices even more. Cutting back on corporate taxes just makes companies bigger profits. They don't pay workers higher wages. Trump never really brought back the jobs he said he was. In any case, some say it's time to rethink the American dream. Some say in America, if you can't afford it, it's not the system, it's you. What do you think about that? Is it true? I'll tell you what though, the rest of the world is sitting up on their fence watching us stumble and fumble around. The once proud empire that ruled the world is now just average. I don't like being average, but half the country is now settling for it. Broke. We're broke. If you want to save up, you can't, and you can try to get ahead. There's nothing you can do, it's too big. Gonna take us down into it. All right, guys, so joining me right now, we have a special guest. You may have seen his videos on YouTube. It's the Economic Ninja. What's up, Economic Ninja?
Not much. How you doing? Thank you so much for having me on.
Now, man, hey, I'm a big fan of yours, and I know a lot of people turn to the Ninja for advice when it comes to how they should invest their money and the latest trends with the economy and stuff, so it's good to have you
Not
on.
financial advice, though. Not financial advice.
Not a financial advisor.
Yeah. I'm just a dude with a bro hawk, a coffee, and a dream.
That's right. Well, a lot of people's dreams are kind of not becoming reality right now. I'm doing a video on the economy and why things are so expensive in America right now. Everything from houses to the cost of education, healthcare, inflation. I want to turn to you. Tell us, why is America so expensive right now?
It's a combination of two things. It's a combination of money printing, excessive money hitting the markets, whether it be in the stock market, rising that, or hitting Main Street, being sprinkled upon the people in the form of stimulus checks. And then the other thing is fear and greed, where people go, I want something and I want it now, so I'm going to buy it. And so it's almost like this bid up process, where in the real estate, it's because there's very low inventory, because quite frankly, people don't have the money to step up into that next house. And then, or in the lumber industry, they're all, I don't care what that 2x4 costs. I want to go build my deck. I've been wanting it for a long time. So it's literally a combination of those two things.
Yeah, I agree. The housing market stuff, it's pretty easy to figure out. But what about let's talk healthcare and college are a big deal for people. A lot of kids can't afford college. They come out with a huge crippling debt. And then there's a whole anti-work movement now for kids that come out of college after spending 150 grand on their education, and then they can't get a job that pays more than 45 grand. So they're leaving the workforce, which is not good for our economy. And then you have people that are older in their 50s and 60s who start to not be able to afford healthcare.
Yep.
College and healthcare, why are those two so expensive?
Okay, so they're totally separate, but we'll break them down. So first off, the only reason college is expensive is because of the ease and the liquidity of student loans. Okay, first and foremost, it is super simple now to sign on the dotted line and get a bunch of money. And it used to be where you would get money for necessities, for the tuition and the books, right? Now, these loans are so gnarly to where you could literally finance your entire lifestyle for between 4 and 6 years. I mean, they'll give you a check to where I know people that are in college and they go, I literally don't even have to work. I can sit back, take all the time to do my studying. And it really is doing two things. It's destroying the work ethic of the average American, all right, because they're not having to hustle and work at the same time as study. It's also running the costs up, because when all of these people are flush with cash, they don't care if tuition went up $25 per unit. They just don't care, because they're going to go get it because of a promise or a dream that if they get that degree, they're going to be able to be somebody in the future. So that's one thing. Now, healthcare is another thing. The insurance industry has made it so easy for doctors and hospitals to continually raise their price. Why? Two reasons. Again, they're flushed with cash because they can name their price and an insurance company is going to pay. On the flip side, there's a lot of times where people don't pay their bills and insurance companies don't pay what the hospitals want. So they jack the prices up even more because they know they're only going to be able to collect on a certain amount of those debts. Okay. So again, both of these things are different, but they come down to one thing, and that is debt. And that is something I've been trying to warn people about. If we can walk away from the debt, like stop getting into meaningless debt, we could blow up the country, like literally change the entire way wealth is created.
I agree. I think kids just go, it's almost like they're brainwashed. They go straight from high school to college, then they study geography or sociology, and they come out with a degree that's meaningless. And it's like, hey, my whole thing is, we used to start at the bottom, and coming out of college, I got a job that didn't pay a lot. I probably made 30 to 40 grand a year, but I worked my way up in that company. And then pretty soon I was doing pretty well at that company. And then I could use that to go to another job. It almost feels like the language I hear from the kids today that come out of college, a lot of the 25-year-olds, they're on the Reddit threads and they're talking about anti-work and I can't get a job and I'm quitting my job and this is BS because there's no good jobs and I don't want to work. It's like, where's the incentive to start at the bottom and work your way up instead of thinking that you're justified and entitled to just walk into a job that pays $75,000 a year right out of college?
Well, the sad thing is there isn't an incentive right now because nobody's starving because of entitlements. We are at the end of an empire. If you read The Fourth Turning, or you read about the Roman Empire as it was falling, artists were depicting young men and women at the courthouse steps feeding each other grapes like this, And the reason why is the artists were trying to depict a time in history where they had all their needs met and they didn't have to work. And we are seeing that right now. The sad thing is I've back in 2006, I remember at Lake Havasu going from, cigarette boat to cigarette boat, cold beer in hand. And all I cared about was talking to who's the boat owner. And I wanted to find out how much they owed on their boat. And I only came across one cigarette boat owner that owned his boat. And then after a few more questions, he used a home equity line to buy it. The same thing is happening with the young people. They have enough. They don't understand that economic cycles happen. I mean, shoot, in the last 22 years, the stock market, the Dow Jones, has collapsed by 50% twice. And yet people go, this time is different. I'm like, oh yeah, it's different. And I think that is going to lead to a revolution or a renaissance actually with our young people, because the cool thing is they have a heart and the desire to make the world great. They just don't know where to put it. So like yourself, and I don't mean to interview you got a college degree, you worked your way up the ladder, but now you find yourself as a company owner, a business owner, and you're enjoying tax benefits and freedom, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And so I believe that we can take that, harness that knowledge and bring it into the younger population's mindset right now. And we could literally, there's never been a better time in America's history, or I believe the world's history, for everyone to start up a small business, because that's how our country was formed. Small businesses, which became big. And I have a feeling we're about to go through that cycle again. And that's what I want to share on my channel.
Yeah, I've been preaching a little bit, and I'm going to start emphasizing a little bit more with people, is that, we've been the leader of the world forever. And I feel like we have peaked clearly, and there's a collapse coming within our country, within our society. It's already happening. But I think there's going to be a financial collapse. And, I think the rest of the world is just watching. I picture the rest of the world sitting on the brick wall with their wine glasses in Europe and in Asia, watching America stumble around, trying to keep their head up and keep this party going. But
let me speak about that actually, because yes, you're right. We have a lot of adversaries that would wish us to fail, right? Because America has done so many great things. I say that the American flag right now is a symbol of what we did right and not a symbol of what we did wrong. So I always we're seeing a lot of hate coming into the country right now. And I want to share something that I believe this is the greatest opportunity for us to acknowledge where we are. And your channel does a very good job of that, acknowledging where we are, going city to city, saying, this is what it looks like. This is the reality. Okay. And then take it, grasp it, and go, we're going to do something about it. And that's why I believe right now is the greatest time to become an entrepreneur on the side, work a little bit extra, and then take that money and set it aside, get it out of the system, whether it be precious metals or cryptocurrencies or getting out of debt. That means you're getting out of the system of debt. That's all currency notes are, is a form of debt. And so this is actually, quite frankly, I only see positive. There's going to be a lot of people that are hurt. There's going to be famine. There are going to be these things. But there's also going to be breakthroughs in technology. There's going to be people that went from poor to wealthy. The Great Depression made more millionaires than any other time, per capita, essentially, in the last 100 years ever. And I believe that's what's going to happen worldwide. People and Ninja Nation, that's what we're all about, is like focusing our attention on being meek and not going big right now, and then taking advantage when technically everyone's losing their minds.
Yeah, if you're watching, you need to subscribe to Ninja Nation right now, everybody.
Yeah.
Good advice. Hey, one more quick question. Homelessness has been really popular on my channel when I went into Portland and San Francisco and Oakland especially, and showed people what it's like on the street, stuff you don't see on Fox or CNN, or you have to kind of dig pretty deep to find stuff like that. It's always popular, touches a nerve. Do you feel like the homelessness is going to get dramatically worse in this country in the next 5 years based on everything that's happening right now?
Yeah. So the way I see it, there's a couple different cycles of being homeless, because I have family members that were homeless for, greater part of last decade. Okay. And it was a choice, straight up choice. They had everything at their fingertips. They chose not to work, right? That was their choice. As a matter of fact, one of my brothers told me once, he goes, dude, this is my choice. I'm like, I can't blame that. As a matter of fact, I give you total credit, right? And I've talked to other people that are homeless, and they've said, this is my choice. Now we have mental illness in the country and all that stuff, and we need to help people. But we also have to separate who we help and who we're making it easy for. That is very important. That's one cycle of homelessness. Now, I do believe it's going to get worse because a lot of people became homeless and started living in their cars in 2007 to 2009 because they were straight up kicked out of their homes. Do I believe that's coming again? Yes, and on a grander scale. I do believe that. I believe we're going to see real estate peak. We are just now, and it's left out of the news, the forbearance issues of people that weren't paying their mortgages for years. They're now able to foreclose on. And what I saw firsthand, boots on the ground, because I had liquidated all my homes, warned all my family and friends. I even went to churches and schools. I was warning everyone in 2005. I watched people lose their homes and never tell anyone out of embarrassment. All right. So there's that certain segment of the population you won't even know. There's no way to even track it. So I do believe rentals are going to be tough to get, things like that. But we also, again, look at the positive side. We need to give people a purpose. Give a man purpose, and his shoulders come back and his head is held high. And there's a lot of people in this country that are just beaten down by the system. And again, that's why I want to start helping people learn that one silver coin in your hand, it's yours. They can't take it from you. It's your choice if you get rid of it. There's no counterparty risk. It's real wealth. It's something that came from the earth. It can't be faked, right? And so we need to give people purpose. And yeah, that's why I think it's the greatest time to start companies right now.
Ninja Nation, I agree with you on that. For those people that don't think they can do it, but especially for the 20-year-olds that have sort of given up and feel like they've checked out, who feel like they have no voice, who are sitting at home waiting for, I don't know what, these anti-worker 25-year-olds that say like, we're out, we're not going to work, F the man. Those people need a swift kick in the butt to get back on their feet, because they can do it. Anybody can do it. They just need to start at the bottom and figure it out, and they just won't, and it's frustrating. Well,
and it's not a quick kick in the butt. You're right. I completely agree with you, but check this out. It's that if you're 20 to 25 right now and listening to this and you went, what, I need a kick in the butt? No, we don't want you to go through pain. We know how amazing it is to just stand up and go, I'm going to be my own man or woman, and I'm going to go crush it out there. I'm not going to get into debt. I'm going to start buying things. I'm going to build and build and build, because there's so many of you right now that have big hearts and big dreams. Well, you know what? I want you to be, if you're a good person and you want to help others, I want you to be a millionaire. Why? Because if you're a millionaire, you're not going to treat all those people working for you like people have treated you in the past. If you remember how lame it is to work for a boss that just lords over you and micromanages you, then I want you to take that pain and I want you to focus it into crushing it, and then never being that person for the people that work for you. And I guarantee you right now, there's somebody on a couch right now that needs to hear this. And I think it's time to stand up and be your own person, and let's go crush it.
Yes. Ninja
Sorry,
Nation.
I don't even want to start crying, but I'm like, this is not the time to sit on the couch. This is the time to take the bull by the horns and let's do this.
Yeah. I think a lot of people needed to hear that. Maybe they can take some motivation from that. Honestly, I think you guys need to sub to Economic Ninja. You can find him on YouTube. He's got awesome videos. That was just a sample of what he does all the time. So you guys need to reach out and get in the know with what's going on with the economy right now and everything that's going on in the country. So that was great, man. I really appreciate that. And
Thank you.
I'm sure people are going to find you and reach out to you soon. So so I'm doing a video on like what's wrong with the economy, and like part of the angle is, the fact that like people aren't working, and I'm encouraged to hear from your perspective, what your point of view is. You moderate the anti-work subreddit, or did you start that sub, or are you just like the moderator of it, or?
Yeah, I'm just a moderator. I was there very early on. A friend of mine started it, but I was not there with him at the time. I joined about a year and a few months later, after I started my own website, abolishwork.com, and he
What's it
basically
called?
invited me afterwards.
What's the website called?
It's called abolishwork.com.
Abolish work. Okay. So
Yeah.
so for people that don't know Reddit, people know what Reddit is. The subreddit anti-work, from what I can gather, it's a lot of younger people who like cheer each other on as they quit their jobs. It's kind of like a screw the man kind of board where people talk about how they don't want to work anymore, they refuse to work, or they want to work as little as possible. Is that a fair way of describing it?
Yeah, we did have a survey a few months ago. Most people are between, I would say, their 20s and 40s. A lot of people are full-time employees. There are some part-time employees. There's some students. Of course, there are some unemployed people as well. But the vast majority of people are between 20 and 40, full-time employed, which might seem a bit of a contradiction. But of course, it's tough to hate something if you don't know how it works. So a lot of those people are people who have full-time jobs, who don't like their jobs, and they want to vent about it, or they want to talk about that with other people, or they want to share memes. And of course, you're right that we have some younger folks as well who are students or are part-time employees and stuff like that, or whatever. And they commiserate about their jobs, or they tell their boss to go screw and stuff like that. Yeah, we've got a lot of that stuff from all kinds of age groups.
Yeah, there's like the theme, the stuff that trends higher, that when you check the sub, it's usually somebody posting a note that they left on their boss's desk, or like an email where they're like, forget this, I'm leaving, or like a story that they tell when they quit their job, and everyone's like, yay, you quit your job. The theme that I get usually is it's a very much like the times have changed and this generation is tired of working under the current situation that we have now. Why is the current theme of the board so anti-work? Is it pay? Is it the way people are treated at work? Is it the quality of work? Like, why is your generation so like anti-work?
Yeah. Wow. That'd be awesome if it was the entire generation, but I really do think it's just, maybe it's millennials and Gen Xers. I don't know. Oh, not Gen Xers. I'm sorry. Gen Zers. But I'm not sure. So, I mean, I think a lot of it is the pandemic. I think a lot of it is the problems with capitalism have kind of come to a front, and a lot of people are just fed up with being treated poorly at work. You look at a lot of the slacker movies that really took off in the 90s, Office Space, and then you, of course, had in the 2000s, you had, The Office, which is a big workplace sitcom about having a really bad boss. There's been a long-standing cultural trend of making fun of work and making fun of bosses and making fun of bad bosses, especially. And I think it's just kind of eventually culminated into a lot of people who are just kind of fed up with the way that capitalism operates, wanting a better job for themselves, or maybe wanting to work less, or maybe wanting to work not at all. We are a pretty big tent movement, so there's a lot of people of different ideologies and a lot of different perspectives. We're pretty left-leaning, that said, but we do try to, have those people who are curious and want honest, open dialogue as long as you follow the rules. I think it's been pretty successful in that. And I don't know if it's a Gen Z thing or a millennial thing, or it's just like people are just fed up. I mean, I think it's the latter, but I don't know. I'm not a statistician or anything, so I can only say so much about what I've noticed. But it definitely seems like, younger people, millennials, Gen Z people are definitely leading that front, in broad sweeps. But obviously we get messages every now and then of like, I'm a boomer and like, or from that generation. And, I think I've thought that I've been anti-work my whole life or something like that, So I think it's something that goes a long way back, but the internet definitely helps get that more public.
What do you think it would take to get your generation and the people that are in this anti-work movement to go back to work or to embrace work in a more, I guess, would it take higher pay, better working environment, better jobs? Like what is it that everybody wants?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody at the end of the day just wants, decent treatment, probably more than decent treatment. I think a lot of what capitalism fails to do on a very systematic basis is that even when they give good wages and even when they give better benefits and stuff like that, it's a systematic element of capitalism where fundamentally the people at the bottom are not valued as much as the people at the top, the stockholders or the bosses or the CEOs, who are making 275 times like what the people at the lowest rungs are making. They're just not valued as much. And I think that's an inherent problem no matter how much you're paid more. Now, that said, I do agree that those things are better. I think things like the minimum wage being increased or more labor law reform and stuff like that. I think those are great things. And, I don't have any problem with them happening. But ultimately, I think what the anti-work movement is about is that this is a systemic issue. It's a foundational issue in not just in America, but all over the world. It's not just an American issue. And so that's something that we really got to take by the root and like really look for like alternatives to like the current system. Reform is definitely a big part of that, but I don't think it's necessarily the whole thing. I think being able to unionize would be great. Being able to, operate worker cooperatives and stuff like that more easily would be great. Being able to work for yourself, but still have like things like healthcare would be great too, instead of the way that the gig economy kind of worked with Uber and Lyft, where you're kind of an independent contractor, you're not really a worker or an employee, so you don't really get any benefits or anything, but you still are given the expectations of like a full-time employer or employee, excuse me. So yeah, that kind of unfair system is not really what I'm talking about. But yeah, that's some of what kind of comes to me from that question.
Okay, that's a lot.
Yeah, sorry.
Clearly, and I agree with you about the healthcare part. I think it's out of control. Those are a lot of things, some of which may eventually play out. In the meantime, the anti-workers, this anti-work movement, how did these people survive without working while they're staying on the sidelines waiting for things to get better so they'll get back into the job market?
Yeah, so like I said, I think a lot of the people from the anti-work movement are working. I work. I'm a dog walker and pet sitter, so I have a couple part-time jobs and I'm a full-time student. But I think the realistic option under capitalism that you do have to work, and usually people have to work jobs that they don't like for people that they don't want to work for. And so it can become a very psychologically complicated situation where you feel like you have to work, but you don't really want to, not necessarily because you're lazy, although that could be the case. I don't think that's even necessarily a bad thing. But it's a lot of people in the anti-work movement, like I said before, via that survey, we surveyed about 1,300 people. So more than a representative sample of any given group of the subreddit. It's obviously not supposed to be exhaustive. We can't survey everybody there. But the general idea, like I said earlier, was that most people there are full-time employees, or they are at least part-time employees. There's only a small percentage of people who are unemployed or students or anything else. And I don't think that's good or bad. That's just kind of how it is. But yeah, I think a lot of these people who are quitting, I think they're just going to other jobs. And I think ideally they're going to jobs that respect them at least a little bit more. I think that old saying, Rome wasn't built in a day. I think people are trying to gradually build up their lives so that they have slightly better job that respects them just a little bit more, or maybe a lot more if they're lucky, and pays them a little bit better and has slightly better benefits, So I don't think the quitting is just about self-respect. I think it's also about individual growth and like people, trying to live slightly better lives, one job at a time. A lot of people don't even have careers anymore. That was super popular in the 40s, the 50s, and started dying out in the 60s and 70s. And, it's only gotten worse over the decades. So, careers just don't really exist for people. I've never had a career. I'm not sure if I ever will. I mean, maybe, but it's certainly possible. Part of why I'm going to school, but even then it's no guarantee. So yeah, I think a lot of people quit their job and they tell their boss off, and then they probably go back to work because that's kind of what you have to do, especially in a pandemic where a lot of health, like we were talking earlier, healthcare is such a big concern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that there's a lot of people. I used to manage a lot of people who were in their 20s, and they felt very frustrated by the fact that they went to a high-end school. They paid a lot of money to go to school, and then they came out of college earning $37,000 a year, and they felt like they should earn more money. Is that part of it too? I have a college degree and I paid a lot of money for that, and I'm in huge debt, so I should be paid more money? Is that part of it?
I think that can be part of it. I think the general frustration with work can be part of it. It's not like a main component, but I definitely sympathize with those people in those situations, especially as a student myself, of course. I'm obviously biased. But I think that there's definitely kind of an undermining of education within college and within, just in general in terms of diplomas and how they work and how much they actually get you. Diplomas used to be worth a lot more in terms of like the opportunities they would afford you and the pay that you would get. It's still true that on average, people from college tend to make more than people who don't, but that's not as true as it once was. And even when it is true, like you said, a lot of people still feel dissatisfied with the yearly wages they're getting, the gross pay and all that stuff, which I think is a totally valid thing. It's not necessarily anti-work, but it's an absolute valid frustration about the economy and the kind of moment that we're in right now with the pandemic and the Great Resignation and all that.
If you could pick either, I'm sort of asking you to speak for the subreddit based on what you've seen. Would the common theme be more respect or pay? If your generation, the younger generation, had to pick one of the two, which one do you think would be more important? That's
a great question. It's tough for me to speak for myself on that question, let alone other people. Yeah, I mean, it's tough because both have their pros and their cons in terms of like choosing one or the over the other. I think ultimately you can deal with disrespect, but you can't deal with a pay that can't, that doesn't help you keep your shelter, like doesn't help you pay your bills or utility. I think the retort could also be that, the bosses don't necessarily have to respect you. They just have to kind of leave you alone and let you do your own thing. Or they don't have to be, we're not looking to be friends with the boss. We're just here to pick up a paycheck and go home and live our lives. I think ultimately it has to be pay out of practicality. I wish that it could be respect, and I wish you could pick respect over pay, but that's unfortunately not really how the economy we live in works. So yeah.
Okay. I guess that's kind of helpful. So the way it used to always be, and I'm sure you hear this all the time, I'm sure you hear this from your parents, you used to start at the bottom and you worked your way up and you had a shitty pay, and then eventually you become a manager, and then you move on, and by the time you're 35, you're old enough that you had to, you got to get there, start at the bottom and work your way up. And it seems like a lot of the people that are younger don't want to start at the bottom, and they don't want to like deal with the whole, like, I don't want to make that much money. I should be making this, or I'm not going to do that for that. Do you guys understand that like the way it usually is like that you start at the bottom and then you like work your way up, or is that like not a thing anymore?
I don't know if that's a fair perception, but from what I've seen, the people at the bottom are treated pretty poorly and they're paid pretty poorly, and it's not just on an individual scale, it's on a systemic scale where people are generally just not treated well when they're at the bottom of the ladder. And I think that the whole idea, the whole concept of the ladder is something that really needs to be reevaluated in the American economy, where you get more respect as you've been there longer, but it's just like, no, you should just give people respect because they're human beings. I mean, unless they're actively hurting other people or being disrespectful. Like, I'm of the belief that people just deserve respect just because they're people. And so it shouldn't matter like where they're coming in. Obviously, in any given operation, experience should matter, age should matter. I'm not saying this stuff is irrelevant. But I also think that this whole climbing the corporate ladder thing is very outdated. I think a lot of millennials and Gen Z folks especially are really seeing that for what it is, which is it just doesn't work out for a lot of people in the economy anymore. Either it takes you way long to climb that corporate ladder, or it's not worth it in the end, or you end up losing a lot of nights of sleep. A lot of those, sitcoms and movies that I talked about earlier that kind of, parodied work or kind of satirized it or criticized it, often talked about like families and friendships and relationships and marriages, especially, that were broken up because of all the meetings that people have to go to, or all the days that they can't take off and spend with their kids or spend with their family. You constantly have that, especially with like the working dad trope, which was really big in like the 80s and 90s. If you can't tell, at one point I considered doing like a whole paper on like media and like anti-work themes and stuff like that, but I never went ahead with it. But especially like in the 80s, 90s, more modern sitcoms or TV shows, the working dad who's never there for his kids was like a big thing in family shows. And the movies always typically ended with the dads like saying like, I'm going to work less, or I'm going to take off more vacations, or I'm going to spend time with my family because family means more than work. Very wholesome, like American message, kind of. It's kind of at odds with two very central American traditions, work and family. But at any rate, I think that a lot of people are fed up with starting at the bottom because I think that they realize there's nothing at the top for them. And that's the central issue. And I don't think it's like, not that you said this, but I don't think it's anything like entitlement or anything like that. I think it's people just realizing like, the corporate ladder system and the way that works, it's kind of broken, and it needs to be, radically rethought.
So the whole housing market thing, I hear a lot about your generation feels like they're never going to be able to afford a home. Home prices are completely through the roof now. If you don't already have a house, you're never going to get one, especially when you're just coming out of college, making $40,000 a year with $160,000 in debt. It's just like not possible. Is that something that you and your friends talk about? Or you guys like, do you feel defeated when it comes to the possibility?
I think, that's definitely, for context, I'm 30. And so I've been able to, be in apartments and stuff like that. But that's really just in the last 5 years, maybe a little more now. But yeah, that's definitely a sense that I've gotten from people I talk to online, friends in real life over the years. My partner and I talk about it too. Like, we would love to have, a place to ourselves so we can have like lots of dogs and cats and stuff like that. But like, in the short term, like I think we just realized that's not realistic. In the long term, we hope it's realistic. But we also hope to like, eventually move out of the US and go to a place where it's a lot more realistic to be in that kind of situation. I think when you grow up poor, any kind of money, especially if you get a lot of it, like when we got the stimulus checks, right? I was still lucky enough to be able to work because I was considered like a necessary, because I worked with dogs back then as well when the pandemic first hit. So I was considered like a necessary employee and stuff like that, or necessary worker, whatever they call them. So I was making money on top of the stimulus check. And so I had more money than I think I'd ever had in my life. It still wasn't like super helpful for me personally. The money I got back from taxes in college was way more helpful. But, you feel like you're, I don't know. It's a weird sensation when you look at that kind of money in your bank account and you're like, this feels wrong. This feels weird. Like, why do I have this kind of money? Who did I hurt? Who did I steal this from?
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people that feel like your generation's like anti-American, over the system, over the fact that you're, saddled in debt and the politics are very frustrating. The voting laws don't seem to go your way. It always seems like your generation's very angry and anti-American. Is that true? Is that partially true? Is that just what I hear about and see on TV? I mean, I don't really ever talk to 25 to 35-year-olds very often about how they feel about their view of America these days.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty politically radical, so I guess I for me, America is just maybe this is kind of sacrilegious to say, but I mean, to me, America is just a country. It's just a land, and it matters more who's in control of that land. The American government is more of my direction of ire than America as a landmass. I think there's some beautiful places in the country. My partner and I took a road trip to Colorado. And like I said, we're on the East Coast, so quite a trip. And there's beautiful places, and beautiful experiences and beautiful, people and stuff like that. And so, I don't have anything against America as like a country, but more so as like as a government or as certain cultural ideas, like the Puritan work ethic and stuff like that, I think are really problematic. I think that certainly my generation and Gen Z people get, painted with that broad brush via the media and stuff like that. I don't see it as super, super accurate. I'm sure it's, there's certainly more criticizing of America than in the past, but I think that's a good thing as long as it's coming from a good place and a place of wanting to change things and, subvert the system and change it for the better. I think that's always a good thing for me, is to be open and critical. I think, you even go back to like what the country was founded on. It was founded on like being critical of everything, especially of government and power structures. Obviously, they didn't do that very well because they kept slaves. Hey, but nobody's perfect, right? Anyway, yeah, it was a pretty inconsistent doctrine, but I still think it's an important one that we stay critical and open-minded and try to make sure that we're not getting taken advantage by power structures. And I think, if people want to call that anti-American, that's fine. I don't really care. I've got no investment in America as a concept per se. But, there are people here who are great. There are, locations here that are great. There are, I've obviously, like I said, I was born here. I grew up here. So I've got many great memories of living in the U.S. So, it's not like a thing that I've got, against America, I guess, as a concept. But it's more so like the government, the power structure, the corporations, stuff like that. That's the stuff that aggravates me personally. Generationally, I don't know. I think a lot of that is similar to what I'm saying. But, I can only speak for myself on so much.
Okay. How many people are on the anti-work sub?
So it's 1.6 million.
1.6 million people. It's got to be one of the most popular Reddit boards, right? I know
it's up there. It's the most active. It's the most engaged and active. It's pretty much almost constantly in the top 10 active commenters and posters on the website, pretty consistently month to month. I think we fell off into the number 11 or something, but I mean, really, at that level, who cares? But we are one of the busiest subreddits on the entire site.
Yeah, it's a very strong movement. Dorian, we need people back into the workforce. We need people to be happy. So hopefully we can find a middle ground, because the economy in the country is relying on all the pieces working together. And when you have a big group of people who are not happy, then we can see what happens with the way the country's going right now. It's kind of on shaky ground right now. I have to say, I do spend a lot of time calling 25. I call millennial and Gen Z's babies a lot. I feel like, but I have to say I'm very impressed by you and the conversation that I've had. And maybe I'm a little bit hard on you guys sometimes, and maybe I should just listen a little bit more about what you guys have to say, because you're very easy to pick on, but you've clearly thought this through a lot more than I thought you had.
Yeah, well, I like to think so. I've been around, a few times at this point, and I think a lot of people on the subreddit have, and I think a lot of it is very educated, and a lot of thoroughgoing debate and discussion happens on the subreddit. It's not all perfect. We all make mistakes, and none of us have all the facts. So I think it's a constant learning process for everybody. I really do hope that things can improve in the economy and people can be treated with more respect and with better pay. And that not only that, but systemic changes can be made on a very deep level too, as we go on. But yeah, like you said, we'll have to see. Things are pretty weird right about now, especially with the pandemic still going on, unfortunately. So it's a weird time to be alive, but you never get to pick that. So we'll just have to see what happens.
It's never a not weird time to be alive, I'll tell you that.
True.
That was great. I appreciate your insight. I think a lot of people are going to learn a little bit from your perspective and to hear a different. I usually don't bring people who disagree with me on. It's an echo chamber. The people I have on are usually agree with me, and then we like double down on bitching about shit. You're one of the first people that I've interviewed where we don't agree on a lot of stuff, but I can value your opinion, and you made a lot of sense in a lot of your points. I don't agree with everything you said, but a lot more of it I do agree with than I thought I would when I hopped on the call with you. So
yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and I mean, I think there's a lot to take from everything, and I'm pretty politically radical and stuff, so I don't expect to agree with a lot of people at this point, I guess, in my life. And I've kind of just resigned to that, which is fine. But I think it's great as long as people are listening to each other and trying to take things to heart. That could be always very difficult, especially online. I appreciate you listening and stuff.
Yeah, no, right now I don't think people care about political and fighting. Everybody just wants each other to just be fucking nice to each other, be a good person, and mind yourself, and just keep your head down, and just be a good person. That's enough right now in this country. Like, to be honest, like we can all get along fine if everybody would just like be nice and respectful. Honestly, like, yeah, I appreciate it. That was really nice of you to come on. And honestly, I learned from your perspective. I thought I was going to be able to ask you questions and you were going to not have good points. And you've clearly thought through this a lot more than I gave you credit for. So are you looking to move and need advice? I do consulting. That's right. I'll sit down and talk about where the next perfect place for you and your family should be. I do it all the time. Together, let's find you a new home that's safe and checks all your boxes. You can get my email in the description to find out how I can help you find your perfect relocation. And I can also help you find your new house too. Email me and I'll work with you on not just helping you figure out where to move, but I can help you find your perfect home too. That's right. Someone's a realtor now. Who wants to deal with a realtor they don't know when you can have me help you, right? Hey everyone. So it's pretty clear by now that elected leaders aren't going to help you. If you don't like what you saw in this video, demanding change won't work. You're going to have to do it on your own. If you want to be safe and want your community to be a place where people want to live, you're going to have to clean the place up yourselves. You're going to have to work with your friends and neighbors to lower crime. Politicians clearly don't care as much anymore. It's up to us.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.